Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Radio Free Urbanism, a podcast about urbanism and stuff. Today we've got a full crew today, which is delightful. This is something I feel like hasn't happened in a little while. I'll introduce you guys one by one. Let's start with Nick the Bike Bum. Say hi, Nick.
Hello, and welcome back, everybody.
And Ethan Myers, our regular SEPTA simp.
Welcome back, everybody. It's great to be here. It's great to have everybody here, and it's great to be present in the wonderful day.
It's great to be present. I agree. And of course, we have a special guest, Miser. Welcome.
Hi. Thanks for having me, guys.
We are delighted to have you. Maybe do like a quick introduction of who you are and how on earth you wound up on our TV screens today.
Sure. I run the Micromobility NYC subreddit, which if you're not on Reddit, that probably means nothing to you. But it's basically an urbanism / activist group out of New York City. We have about 23,000 members now, I think. And we just basically fight people all the time for bike lanes and sidewalk enhancements and curb treatments and the standard stuff I'm sure your audience is familiar with.
Yeah, that's fantastic. We need people like that looking for these little things. I've had some conversations with engineers and city planners, and I bring up a few things that they're like, oh, I didn't think about that. And I think that's one reason why it's important to have those conversations and get some niche feedback. I know with some recent projects the city's been working on, it's been important to talk to people who have varying levels of sightedness about how we can improve that accessibility, right? Whether that's with tactile strips or other guiding options. So yeah, I think that's fantastic. We're going to have some more questions for you later on in the show, but I'd like to also welcome Jen and Skitch in the live chat. Thanks for saying hi. Thanks for joining us. And if you guys want to join the live chat, you can go to patreon.com/radiofreeurbanism. And for just $1 a month, you can support the show and everything that we're doing here. But Nick.
Only $1.
Only $1. I know.
So that's pretty crazy.
Only $1. What a treat. It was $100 a month, and then we decided to
Nobody was joining. What the hell?
Yeah.
9% off. What a deal.
Yeah. Nick, you've got an update for us.
Yeah, so last week our title of the show was Bug Out Bike, because we talked a lot about, having a bike in case of emergency. Well, in reference to that, I got a message from Ian. He's a volunteer over at Vancouver Vision Zero Vancouver, and he messaged me an actual bike race that happens in Vancouver about this. It's called Disaster Relief Trials, established in 2012, and it happens every year. I don't know how I didn't hear about this, but check this out. This is a bug out bike race, okay? So the DRT Vancouver race is a timed event over several hours with a series of checkpoints across the North Shore to pick up and deliver relief supplies, food, water, fuel, fragile medicines, etc. Competitors are given a map and a manifest an hour before the race, and they only have this map to plan the route. And the obstacles will be integrated into the route, such as barriers, rough terrain, and water crossings. And at the end of the race, competitors will be delivering up to 50 kilos of supplies to the finish line. And they allow anybody to enter. If you have a bike that you think you can carry 50 kgs of stuff to go through this trial, you can join. And I think this is so cool. I don't know how I didn't hear about this, but if it's going to happen next year, I have to go. I don't think I have anything that can carry this. I don't have a bike like this yet, but if I do, I'm definitely going to have to take part if I can. But I'll be covering this when it happens. That's so cool.
That is super cool, and I think you should participate. Nick, I just want to say, if you need a place to stay after the big, massive earthquake hits the Pacific, you're welcome to make your way out to Calgary and stay with me. The scenario here, it says the scenario, it's 4 days after the big one, a magnitude 9 earthquake. Something I'm assuming people out in Vancouver and on Vancouver Island are constantly, obsessively thinking about. Is that right, Nick?
I actually think about that all the time.
Yeah, it's your Roman Empire, right?
We think about it down here too.
Yeah. I don't think about earthquakes. Actually, Calgary has pretty nice weather, all things considered, despite the minus 17 right now. How is it over in New York City there, Miser?
We're blessedly free of almost all natural disasters. It's one of the real perks of living here. Earthquakes would be terrifying in a city like New York. We had a very minor one that kind of shook the books on the bookshelf a little while ago, and even that was a little scary. So I don't know how you guys live with it, to be honest with you.
Yeah, have you experienced an earthquake out there, Nick?
Just minor ones, like little tremors. You're like, was that an earthquake? And then you go on Twitter, you're like, yep, it was. Okay. But nothing serious at all. Not like the videos you see from like Japan where like the whole room shake.
Yeah.
That's my nightmare. I'm always prepared for that.
That's California.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the West Coast.
Yeah.
Interesting. All right. Well, that is super cool. I look forward to your updates on that, Nick, when hopefully that
it should be
happens
next
again.
August, I think.
Yeah.
August 2025.
Fantastic. Ethan, you've got an update for us.
Yes, absolutely. So I just wanted to share something from one of the wonderful people out here in Portland. This is Coach Balto, and they're also known for running the PDX bike bus, one of the original bike buses, which is essentially a way to kind of get kids to school by bike rather than, getting driven by car, and in a safe manner as well, too. And Mr. Coach Balto got invited out to the White House to attend an event with the president. And it's just kind of that wonderful recognition that we want to see of urbanists out there. It's wonderful to see them get invited to these events. And Coach Balto also got to meet famous person Flava Flav. And actually, I think it's really cool when we get to see urbanists interact with, other celebrities and stuff like that, and kind of see, that interaction, introduce ideas to new people, and I guess we can kind of welcome Flava Flav to the war on cars, maybe, hopefully.
Nice. That's fantastic. I always love when you see other people from other spheres get into urbanism. I don't know how into urbanism Flava Flav got, but the more the merrier. That's what I
probably
say.
At least a little talking to. I mean,
yeah.
At least an introduction to the idea.
Yeah, you kind of get some of it, and yeah, hopefully, Coach Balto was able to maybe drop a line, right? Maybe we're gonna have a new cycling advocate or something. Well, let's get into the news stories. We want
to talk about Miser and what he's doing in New York first, I think.
Okay.
It'll lead into our first story. I think that'll be great. And the first question I have to ask is, how long have you been living in New York City?
Oh, about 20 years or so now.
Oh, okay, so you're a newbie.
Yeah, not a real New Yorker.
Not a real New Yorker.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I barely even should open my mouth in public.
Yeah, really.
Yeah, no, I've been here a while, and I've seen a few cycles of the city at this point, and but honestly, even before that, I lived in the suburbs of New York. So I've been here, other than my college years, basically my whole life.
Spent some time, live some life out in New York. And you mentioned before as well that you're advocating for micromobility, for these small improvements to the pedestrian realm, to like the human experience on the streets. How is that fight going? Are you optimistic?
That's a hard question. I mean, it's day to day. It's such a broad spectrum of issues that there are some that I'm optimistic on. I think, the general arc of history bends towards bike lanes or whatever. But, it's also agonizingly slow. I mean, one of the things that I think people don't realize is just how big New York is compared to other cities. We're really like, if you took the next 4 cities in America, and broke New York up, we would be the size of like the next 4 largest cities or something, like LA, Chicago, Houston, and Phoenix. So, I mean, it's like if you took all those cities and put them right on top of each other. So whenever you talk about like how much progress we're making, you have to keep that in mind. It's like, like our agencies like to be like, oh, we built like the most bike lanes. It's like, yeah, of course we did. We're like much larger than any other city, right?
And have a ton of money.
Yeah. But relative to like, the scale of the problem and how large of a city we are, it's basically nothing. We built something like 20 miles of bike lane this year out of 6,000 miles of road. We did minor daylighting treatments at a few hundred, maybe high hundreds intersections out of, again, like, I don't know, like tens of thousands of intersections. So my point being that, from the lived experience of somebody that lives here, you can actually probably move through the city without even seeing some of the changes that come about on a year-to-year basis. It's very small.
Yeah, it's kind of, I mean, similar in Calgary. We have some pockets where we're like, this is nice. Like, this is great. Look how walkable this is. This is very comfortable. We've got some, great support for small businesses in this area. And then you go to other areas and you're like, who planned this? Like, we have a road the width of an airport runway. There's one road in a suburb of Calgary, which I think I've shared on the show before, where the road, it's a 2-lane road, right? We have 1 lane one way and 1 lane the other way, and then a parking lane on either side. And it's the size of our 8-lane highway. Like, it's massive, right? Just unnecessarily. So I think any city has these pockets, but really to do it for the size of a massive city, especially something the size of New York, that's a feat. So maybe I'll let Nick get into the news story here, and we'll look forward to your thoughts on this one.
Yes, but before I do, I have to ask my favorite question: is how you got into not only advocacy but your interest in micromobility, because that's my wheelhouse. That's what I want to know. How'd you get into it?
Sure.
Your origin story.
My origin story, sure. There's two quick answers to this. The first one being a very specific case. When I was living here, when I first moved here, and I didn't know anything about any of this stuff. I had no terminology for anything urbanist or anything. And I didn't own a car like everybody that moves here when they're poor and in their 20s or whatever. And there was the DOT, the local DOT tried to convert a plaza near me that was the most obvious place that you'd take a roadway and convert it into pedestrian space. And the car nuts flipped and basically killed the whole project over 2 parking spots. And that, even at the time, not knowing any of this stuff, seemed so insane to me that I was like, wow, car drivers in this city are on a different level of entitlement and obnoxiousness. And so that, I think, planted the seed. But then, of course, many years later during the pandemic, like many people in New York, I took up, at the time, electric scooters and city bike to avoid the subway, because everybody in New York uses public transit to avoid, especially the early days before the vaccine, when we really thought that it was primarily spreading through the subway. Basically everybody stopped using mass transit, which in a city like New York is a huge problem, because we literally do not function without our mass transit. So that's basically where I started riding micromobility and realized that this is actually way better. It's way easier, even if, you can come back into the subway system. And it was such a revelation, and it gave me so much freedom that I guess I became radicalized about it. It's like somebody that finds Jesus late in life. It's like, I got to tell everybody.
That's awesome. No, I think a lot of us have that story. That was the same for me. It was around the pandemic that I got an electric scooter, and the rest is history. Now here we are. So it's cool to see a similar story. And obviously in New York, it's such an incredible experience because you can see so much compared to taking transit. And I love transit. I love the MTA.
Oh, me too. Yeah. Oh, I love transit. I mean, I love the subway, but I got to be honest with you. Since I found, e-bikes and electric scooters, I barely take it.
Yeah, it's a different experience, right? You see the city, you really see it every block you go by. It's a different experience. It's really cool.
Yeah, and I think e-bikes are kind of that game changer for a lot of people, right? Because I don't have to wait for my e-bike, right? I just hop on it and I go. I don't have to worry about transfers or anything. As long as the infrastructure is there. In a city, an e-bike is, at least for me, the easy choice.
And you can't forget that. Yeah, and you can't forget that range either that you get with those e-bikes. I mean, with the ability to actually further extend your range and not having to physically exert yourself as much as a traditional bike, it really does help, with making a city a lot easier to come across by bike.
Yeah. Bikes offer the freedom that car ads promise.
Yeah. Well, Nick, am I allowed to tell you to start this story?
You can tell me. Just tell me.
I can tell you. Start the story. So
no, Nick, you're not allowed.
Obviously,
you gotta wait 1 second.
Alex is going to lead this one. We've got a lot
Your
to talk
co-hosts
about.
have lost patience. Get on with it.
Yeah.
this is coming out of New York City, and it's something that's been talked about a lot, not just with e-bikes and stuff, but with bicycles. It's happened in the past. It happens in some places, but they're proposing this. The bill is on the table, and it's been talked about, and even Miser here was there in City Council to talk about it. We got a video we're going to play of you talking in City Council, but NYC is proposing licensing and registration for e-bikes and e-scooters. If I get this right, micromobility devices in general that are electrically powered. Is that right?
Electrically powered, yeah. That's the key distinction.
So could you kind of just tell us what this bill is in general?
Well, I mean, we could be here a while, but essentially what it is in general is a backlash against micromobility as a form of transportation. We have a bunch of what are essentially suburban, sorry, my alarm's going off here. Great. Yeah, so we have a bunch of suburban council members, essentially, because the city is very large. It's not just Manhattan. And we have several types of zone in New York. We have Manhattan, which is super urban, and we have a very urban ring that's somewhat like Paris around that. And then we have a suburban ring around that. And the suburban council members have basically lashed out against micromobility and tried to kill it in the cradle before it gets to the point where they can't. And this is part of that effort. It's also coming on the back of somewhat, I would say, I hate to use these terms, but it's pretty blatant racism a lot of times in the way that the argument is framed, because we have a well-publicized immigrant influx who have largely found work using micromobility, oftentimes on mopeds. And there's a lot of backlash from certain sectors of the public to try and, push them out, if you will. And this has sort of become a vector for that as well. Interesting.
So I would like to know, because let's play your video here first before we actually get into this, because I think it's perfect. You have 2 minutes that you talk about this, and I think it turned out just perfectly. So this is at the City Council in New York. Where is the City Council actually happening?
The City Council, it happens in City Hall, which is in downtown Manhattan, basically right across the Brooklyn Bridge, right at the base of the Brooklyn Bridge.
I'm Alex Duncan, also sometimes known as Miser. I want to start by saying that people don't need e-bikes. They don't need cars, and they don't need mass transit. What they need is transportation. The bike, the car, the mass transit, those are all tools that help them achieve the thing that they need. So the question is, how do we as a society provide that, and how do we do it best and safest? Several times today, notably when Commissioner Rodriguez and Comptroller Landers' rep were speaking, they gave stats about the relative dangers of cars and bikes and were roundly booed by the supporters of this bill. That kind of gives up the game that this is about safety. When you're booing objective reality in service of vilifying bikes and the people that ride them, you aren't interested in safety. You're fighting a dumb culture war. Because objective reality is very clear here. Cars are the killers on our streets. Cars are the #1 killer of children under 13. #1, and that's by far, and it's a fact. Not just compared to e-bikes, compared to everything. It's not e-bikes killing children on the street of New York. Cars kill, cars maim, and cars crash 300 times a day in this city in the 5 boroughs. And that's just the reported crashes. The likely ones are much higher. The only way to get people out of their cars is to provide alternatives like e-bikes. E-bikes objectively save lives when people choose them instead of cars. Again, people need transportation, and they need to choose a mode. Every single person on an e-bike massively reduces the danger to the public, and anecdotal stories do not change that. These are statistics. We're dealing with a large number of people. Are there harms from any of these modes? Yes, of course.
Thank you.
It's about relative harms.
Next.
I gotta say, I do like the chime at the end. It sounds like stepping into a Japanese convenience store.
Yeah,
but
no,
they
it's
give you
great.
2 minutes.
It's like a very loud garage door opening every time somebody has to stop. It's like, why can't we use a different? Anyway.
Anyway, excellent little spot that you did for 2 minutes. I think it hit a lot of the great points. I love the fact that you bring up, it's about transportation, right? And it's about safety. What's the holistic approach that we need to take to get that? Because that's, I think, what most of us are talking about. But I've seen this argument come up time and time again, and I've seen it come up already when talking about this. And it's people who claim fallacy. They point at you, what you said, and they say, that's whataboutism. And it's actually a problem that we need to address. What do you say to that?
Right. So that is the what I get all the time to this, and it's what the main sponsor of the bill, a council member called Bob Holden, kept saying to people and later said to journalists. It's like, why are you talking about cars? And it's like, the obvious answer, which I feel like shouldn't have to be explained, is that these are all options for doing the same thing. So that's why they're compared against each other. You can't just talk about one in isolation. It's like, for instance, if you're talking about coal-fired power plants or, nuclear power plants. It's like, which should society use? You have to talk about them relative to each other, right? The fact that the coal is so deadly is a great reason for why you should be having nuclear plants or solar or wind or whatever, right? Like, these things are options for doing the same thing. So you have to talk about them relative to each other, which doesn't seem to be something that people like, people that want bike licensing seem to understand. But if people need to get around, which we do, they can choose either of these modes, right? Getting people out of their cars makes them safer. Making it harder to get on a bike will get them in cars. That's why we're comparing the two. It's not whataboutism. It's literally a holistic transportation system and which mode people are using.
Yeah, well said. Absolutely. It's always interesting to try to combat that, but it is about the holistic approach, and people don't realize the knock-on effects when we do actually encourage micromobility and how it actually makes everybody safer.
Right.
But what is these? Okay, no. Before we get to the solution, why doesn't this work? Because this is something I've been looking into, and I've found literally zero. I've been looking for days now. Zero data on whether or not this does anything, positive or negative. Registrations for e-bikes, nothing. Have you found anything, or do you know of any data?
A few cities have tried it, and they usually repeal it almost immediately because it just simply doesn't work, and it's very costly. I mean, bureaucratic processes like this, like where you have to set up. For instance, the DOT was asked what they'd have to do to actually implement this, and they had a whole laundry list of things. You've got to, set up a registration system. You've got to have brick and mortar stores where people can come and troubleshoot issues with their licenses. You've got to hire new staff that has to maintain this stuff. You've got to hire lawyers. You've got to adjudicate problems with tickets related to the license plate. I mean, it's like a whole thing. It's a whole constellation of issues that are all very expensive, very hard to maintain, require lots of legal oversight to solve a problem that's not that big in the first place, and the benefits are very small, right? The idea that someone on an e-bike is such a danger that it justifies this huge government reaction is never going to really make sense unless your entire goal is to try and hurt micromobility. Like if your goal is I want to make it as hard as possible to ride an e-bike so that my car is, I don't have to see them when I'm driving around, then it makes sense. But if you actually think about it from like a logistical point of view, it falls apart immediately.
Yeah, it is pretty crazy. And like where I come from on this is like, I think there is a case for registration for speedy micromobility devices. Like if it goes over 20 miles, that's like 30
I agree.
kilometers per hour. But this is the huge but, not until we've hit a critical mass where the streets are safe. We have the infrastructure in abundance that can facilitate this, where it's an actual problem, where like our modal share is something like, 15 to 30%. Then we can talk about it. But until then,
you'll be happy to know that here in New York, where we're having this conversation, that the heaviest and the fastest mode, which I don't personally consider micromobility, but we call them mopeds here. Sometimes a lot of European countries and stuff call them scooters. I'm talking about the step-through frames that are basically light motorcycles that a lot of food delivery happens on. Those already require a license. Yeah. And what we found is that very few of them get licenses. And there's very little enforcement because the NYPD barely enforces traffic law to begin with, right? So we can't even get license plates on cars in this city. The idea that the 15-year-old is going to go out and license his e-bike and that there's going to be enforcement if he doesn't is another point that just, it's laughably absurd. Really?
The thing about criminals is they don't tend to follow the law.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. That's another point that I've made continuously here is that, the people that the very small number of dangerous riders, and there are dangerous riders on two wheels, there are people that don't respect pedestrians enough or drive recklessly or whatever, or go too fast. But the small number of people that need some sort of thing to address that issue are not going to care one way or another if Bob Holden's license plate bill passes. This is not like, it's not going to fix any problem. The people that it will, affect are the law-abiding people that are already safe, and those people now will choose something that's more dangerous. So
or people who are on the edge who are interested and are dissuaded just by that small amount of friction that they need to pass through to actually get onto it.
Yeah, because this is coinciding with, I'm sure you guys know, our congestion pricing fight, which we have been fighting for the last, really 20 years, but especially for the last 6 months or so. And the city's trying to get people out of cars, right? So this works against that, right? Like imagine you're somebody you own a car, you've already paid for it, paid all this money into it, you've already registered it, maybe, probably. What incentive would you have to switch modes if we're going to make it so much more difficult and you got to now pay money and go get registered and take time and, I don't know, maybe take a test or something to get your bike licensed? It's literally working against the philosophy and goals that other legislation in the city and the state is trying to achieve.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. So, obviously we know this is not going to fix it. It's not going to fix those people who are riding recklessly. What do you think is the best solution? And yes, this is just an opportunity for us to jerk each other off and talk about safe streets.
Sure. The best solution obviously is infrastructure. The problem we have is that, the people that need to hear this never actually learn anything about infrastructure and never do any research into the places that have fixed their street safety problem with infrastructure. So they're very skeptical. There was open derision about, the need to just simply change the streets so that they're inherently safer and self-enforcing. Because the people pushing things like bike licensing or whatever do not understand any of these points anyway, right? They don't know what daylighting is. They don't know what bulbs outs are. They don't know what raised crosswalks are or how bike lanes makes things safe. And they have no clue, right? So that's sort of where a lot of our work is currently, is we have to make more of the public aware of this stuff. And I don't know. That's the solution to. Sorry for the long answer to the pretty simple.
No, that's good. That's exactly what I was fishing for. Just talk more. It's good. No. I think what we need to do is set up a GoFundMe so we can send Palladino and Holden to the Netherlands for a week so that they can experience it firsthand.
Yeah, they wouldn't get it. It's like you might as well send your dog there and see what they come back with. These are not bright people, frankly.
Fair enough. Yeah. All right. Well, I'm hoping that it turns out well. What's the prognosis as it is? Is this looking like it's going to pass or what?
I don't know if anybody knows that. So it needs a majority of the council. There's 51 people in the council, and currently 29 are signed on. When we started that hearing that you played that clip from, there were 31 signed on. 2 of them dropped off during the hearing, which is amazing. Both were black council members who rightly realized that it would just be used by the NYPD to sort of bring back a bike version of stop and frisk, which was I don't know if you're familiar, is our controversial and very unconstitutional law, later struck down for being constitutional law, where the cops could just go up to mostly minorities and frisk them, basically. So that, that combined with, this is getting a little in the weeds, but in New York City, everybody jaywalks, and for the last few decades, the statistics show that it's basically unenforced, other than very targeted enforcement against usually black people. So, the black council members obviously sort of read the tea leaves and also saw the type of people that were arguing for bike licensing, which were not subtle about their, racial intents with this bill, and dropped their support. Interestingly, the reason I bring this up is that there are 8 other black council members in the 29 that are currently still on the bill that, theoretically should drop for the same reasons. Unfortunately, those 8 are a little more asleep at the wheel than the 2 that dropped. We have a certain, there's different levels of awareness and participation among the council members, sort of in our city. I don't know if that's probably common everywhere, but
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it seems like you kind of have to play the political game to try to, I don't know, bring that forward so they might actually notice that.
Yeah. I mean, it's
Yeah.
interesting because there's so many reasons why this is bad. The fact that it would be used to target minorities was one of them, but there's a million other reasons why this is a terrible idea. So we only need 4 council members to drop off the bill, and other than the suburban very right wing members like Holden and Palladino, 4 could drop off for almost any reason. I mean, there's just choose a reason out of a hat.
Well, I'm going to be hoping that it does not get
Yeah.
passed. I think most people listening to this are going to have the same feeling, but we're going to follow the story as it happens. And I'm sure if you guys want to see more of this, subscribe to the subreddit. Is it Micromobility NYC? Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct.
And it's basically, in my opinion, it's like the best micromobility subreddit.
Oh,
that's
thanks.
like really thriving. So thanks to you.
We have a lot of good members. It's not just me, but thank
Yeah.
you. Yeah.
But yeah, we're going to follow this story for sure as we go on. But the next one we have here is from Alex. Maybe are you ready for this, Alex?
No, you know what? Actually, I want to talk about something else. No, just kidding. Yeah. So this is the Green Line. We've been following this for a while, and there are some hot updates. So this is more just going to be a little bit of an update because there is more information that came out while we were sitting here. So the Green Line, if you've been following, basically this is Calgary's 3rd train line, LRT line that we have been working tirelessly to build. I've been waiting for this train my entire life. One of the stations further in the southeast is in the community where I grew up. So I've always knew this was coming, and I've always wanted it, right? I've always looked forward to it. But as time goes on, it gets more and more frustrated by more and more things. We did, a decade of engagement on it. Where do we want the line to go? What are your vibes with this? How do you want it to work? That sort of thing. And I'll note again that this line, the original right-of-way study for this was done in the 80s, I think. So we've been talking about this for a long time. And then at one point when we're kind of getting ready for things to get going, and we had federal funding and we had provincial funding, the provincial government said, well, just wait, we just want to double check everything. And then after 2 years, we were like, okay, did you double check? Is everything good? Can we start doing this thing? And they said, oh, yeah, actually, yeah, it's all fine. Go ahead, go for it. Then as we go forward, we start doing some preparatory work for the Green Line. We start moving some utilities because we have to do some tunneling downtown. We're getting it all organized. We ordered And I say we. I wasn't involved in the negotiations. I say we as
like
in
a sports fan.
Calgarians. Yeah. I try and say we because it gives me, it encourages me to participate in the conversation. It provides some agency. And so we even ordered trains, and which I'm not sure was the right decision to do, was to order trains before we started laying track. We may have done some of those things out of order, the council at the time, but alas, we got it rolling. Then this year, the provincial government confirms, yes, we are good to go. And then later they said, actually, we want you to make sure that you meet these couple requirements that we have. And then the city met those requirements, and then they said, actually, we're not good to go. And then they paid a consulting firm, AECOM, $2.5 million to take another look at it. And after a couple months, they came back with a plan, and they said, you cannot tunnel. Tell us the best alignment. But very specifically, they said, you cannot tunnel. No tunneling downtown. We don't want to do tunnels. Make it elevated or at grade. And so they come back with this plan. And they say, look, we're going to do an extended line, and it's going to be $6.2 billion, which is the price tag that the city had for this shrunken line because of inflation and everything. And poor cost estimations from the beginning. They had to shrink the line down. So now the provincial government says, actually, you're going to do $6.2 billion for this extended line. So, we saved it. Isn't that great? Well, the provincial government didn't have included the $1.3 billion in known costs and risks included in this work. And so the extended line is actually $7.5 billion, which is $300 million more than what the city's estimate for the same length of line was. Whole disaster, big shit show, and the provincial government also didn't release the report until we've been recording this. So I have yet to read that report. It just came out, and so once we get off of here, I'll read it. But it's like this frustrating thing. Like people just want to move around. Right? People want to get to work. People want to visit their friends, family. They want to go to sports games. They want to live their life, right? And this has been held up again and again and again because it's turned into a political football. Because the mayor who initiated the beginnings of this project and was working on it is now the leader of the opposition party on the provincial level. So it's terrific. It's really, really terrific that the provincial government has decided that this is going to be something that I don't know if they're trying to kill it or if they're trying to make the city look bad or if they're trying to make their opposition look bad. If I were them, I would have said, hey, you know what? We had a huge surplus last year. We're going to fund that extra little bit. We're going to come in and save that line. That's been a disaster that you have to keep shrinking because you keep winding up the costs. That's what I would have done if I was the provincial government. I would have come in and I would have been the hero, right? But what they've chosen to do instead is to mess around with this project and throw wrenches in this project until now what we have is a corpse and an absolute disaster and on a train line that we desperately need. So that's my rant. What do you? I don't know. You guys have been hearing me talk about this for the longest time.
Transit projects are famous for staying within their budgets. Famous.
Yeah. I mean, any big project, right?
You just have to love the ability for subcontracting and just going to the private side for these, public works projects to truly inflate your budget for no reason.
No,
we're going to outsource everything.
I'm going to say it's not even just it being like a private ordeal that has that has inflated these costs, right? This is time. The biggest factor on this is that time has inflated these costs. is that we wait, and we consult, and then we consult again, and then we say, actually, I might want to rethink that, and then we wait, and then we wait, and then we wait. I shared an article on the show a while ago that was in the Hub. I forget who wrote it. I think Eric Lombardi, and it talked about, like, you know, the issues that we have with building transit, particularly in North America, and yeah, it's you know, a project like this predictably would have cost overruns. You'd expect that. It's a transit project. It's a big project. It's an infrastructure project. It involves risks like tunneling, right? It involves risks like right-of-way and just general construction, right? Like, construction is not devoid of risks in any scenario, no matter what you're building. But what has really, really screwed things up is politics. And we need productivity over politics, right? Like, people need to be able to get around the city. They don't, like, I don't care who builds the train. I don't care what color your T-shirt is. People need to get around, and it's been incredibly frustrating that, that
that's what the highway's for, Alex.
Right,
Like,
right.
If your interstate had crumpled, that shit would have been fixed in a week. You know,
Yeah,
this
well,
is really
and-
your fault for not asking.
Sounds
for
like a
an
familiar
interstate.
project
Yeah.
I remember out of Pennsylvania
Yeah.
and
you know what?
California.
And I will say, when the Red Line has had issues, the Red Line in Calgary is our biggest or busiest train line. When that has had issues, it's been fixed fast. When we had floods in 2013, fixed like so fast. That was priority number one. It moves like 16 lanes of highway traffic in and out of downtown every day on the single track, right? Or it's two tracks, but you know, one in each direction. It's a big deal, and we took care of it. Austin says it took 14 days from being demolished from flooding to being fixed, which is great. But and everybody knows, everybody agrees. Every single politician who talks on this is like, yeah, we need transit. We need that transit. Let me show you where I'm talking about here. So this is a map of Calgary that I've pulled up here. This is the red line, and this is the blue line. I don't know why the blue line is purple on here, but it is. The green line fits here. This is where the green line goes. So it fills in this very obvious gap that we have in our transit service, and particularly in the southeast. I'm not going to zoom in too far because then it'll show my little house icon.
So like a north to south route that's kind of on the east side of Calgary for those who are listening.
Yeah. So, okay, so in the north here, there's a lot of transit that is serving this corridor, that's serving this Centre Street North corridor. It's busy, and we don't have enough buses on that route, and really the solution is the upgrade to LRT. But down in the southeast here, there are these gaps. There's the river here, there's industrial parks. There are not very many great road connections, and so the LRT was going to fill this really, really important role. And right now, for now, like it's looking pretty dead, because we're having these problems with our funding partners, our junior funding partners. And by the way, the federal money runs up the clock in March, and then it's gone. Like, if we don't start building this, it's just gone.
So can I ask a question? Can I just switch seats and become a
Yeah, please.
So this is, as you've acknowledged, a political problem. You've got political actors gunking up the works. What is the local political response from you, from activists, right? Because I feel like, to preface this question, I feel like this is what we as urbanists do all the time. We're like talking about the high level stuff, like, oh, we need trains. Like, yeah, of course. But like, what are you doing to like put a knife in the back of the like metaphorically, of the politician that is, the politicians and the groups that are holding us up?
Yeah. So we have an election coming up municipally in 2025. I would say, though, the municipal politicians are not the biggest issue with this. I think this is one area where a lot of our city council has been putting effort into, right? Like, they live here. They see that we need train lines, right? That we need this LRT in particular. on the provincial level, we are only halfway through, not even halfway through the term. And so that is going to be another thing when that election comes up, because people won't be riding the train that we should have had built by that election.
So
right?
this like my point in all of this, and this is a message for like the broader urbanist community, your audience and everyone, is that we need to be building political power ourselves, right? Politicians care about voters, and they care about people that get involved and turn out for their issues and stuff, right? So like it's we have this problem right now in the urbanist movement where we're falling behind on a lot of these projects because we simply don't have the local foot soldiers that make a difference. Like the groups fighting us are well organized. They go to community meetings, they go to stuff. Like if where you live does not have a group of people fighting for transits or transit projects or bike lanes or whatever it is that you care about, the politicians are not going to care either, right?
Yeah.
So I hope, I know I'm a hammer that sees everything as a nail, but like you guys, we all need to get a lot better about building local coalitions of citizens that care and are willing to put in the time to fight for this stuff.
Yeah, and I'll say in Calgary we have Calgary Transit Riders, we have Calgary Alliance for the Common Good, we have Calgarians for Transit, we have Project Calgary, we have More Neighbors Calgary,
cool.
We have Strong Towns Calgary, right? Like
that's what
we
I
have
wanna
all
hear.
of these organizations
Good.
who, like we do letter writing campaigns, we show up at City Hall and protest these things and rally together. We go to the municipal building and rally together. And we're banging our drums, we're writing op-eds, we're making content, we're talking about these issues. And the problem is that it's not, in this case, the organized group that is fighting against this train line is the provincial government, they have a majority government. They're going to do what they want. They don't like the guy who sits opposite them, and they've decided that this is going to be the issue that they try and make difficult for the city to complete. And so that's the struggle that we're facing, is that this has become the political football. Our premier, I've talked about before, our premier likes trains. Our provincial government is right now planning a regional rail master plan, which is going to be awesome, and they're serious about it, and I'm excited about that project, and I support that project. But it could have been anything. It didn't have to be transit. It could have been anything, and they would have fought against it because it's a big project that was started by the guy that they, have a political bone to pick. And it sucks because people who just want to live their life, who want to get around their city, have been the ones to suffer, right? Like the politicians who are doing this don't live in Calgary. They don't live in Southeast Calgary. They don't live in North Central Calgary. For them, it's a political football. It's not a serious transportation mode that they themselves personally will be using. So. Yeah, that's my thing. I'm frustrated about this. I still support the Green Line, but I'm not optimistic that it will be happening anytime soon. So, yeah, thanks for coming to my TED Talk, guys.
TED Talks recently, for sure. A lot of them.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah. Well, I'm a talker. Might change my name to TED too. But thanks, Skitch. Skitch says, you guys deserve the Green Line. I think we do. I really think we do. We've already spent a lot of money on this project.
You spent a lot of money. You already got 2 lines at the moment. Why not add a third?
I know. We need team players, honestly. We need team players. But yeah, that's all I have to say about that. I don't know if you guys have anything else to say about that, but if not, I'll pass it on to Nick, who has a Vancouver-based story.
It's a really quick story. Yeah, this happened a few weeks ago. I actually had this in the doc, but we didn't end up sharing it last week. But this is from City Council in Vancouver, where a city councillor was tuning in to the council meeting from a, let's just say, peculiar place. So I'm going to play it here.
I will be brief but heartfelt, and I just want to extend a thank you to all of the younger generations that are now carrying the blame of the history and the truths that have happened. It's not an easy thing to do.
That's an interesting office.
Through time and time again at different parts in this process, from working originally with the PNE, securing the facility, and now that it's reality, we handed the keys over, which was a very proud and happy moment for the PNE to be able to contribute in a small way and have those keys over, as was mentioned. But to step up again and talk about funding, and while the stories need to be told, they come at a cost as well. It's not easy to do. So I just wanted to thank everybody for doing that.
At least she's checking her shoulders. So
thank you.
Yeah. She's in her car.
Councillor Fry.
She's in her car. And at first you're like, oh, yeah. I mean, she's in her car, but it's not that bad. And then she starts moving. You're like, oh, no, she's driving. She's not just parked somewhere. But, yeah, that's not the first time I've seen that happen. Not here in Vancouver, but she's the same city councillor, that's Sarah Kirby-Young, who a few weeks ago swore in city council, and it created a hubbub. She's like, what's the fucking procedure? I don't remember what she said, something like that. It was like, oh!
Everybody start clutching their pearls,
Yeah. But yeah, I've seen this happen in other places where, like, a city councillor was, like, tuning in, and he had used background replace, but you could still just see the seatbelt.
Yeah.
So
there's a good one from a courthouse recently where
yes.
Suspended license.
Anyway, I just wanted to share that because I thought it was funny. Yeah. It's not funny, like it shouldn't be happening, but it is somewhat funny.
It's remarkable how many people, as I'm riding bikes through New York City, I can obviously see into their car because I'm sitting at the right height, and it's remarkable how many are like watching YouTube or have the sports game going on the screen on their dash.
Just using their phone in general, it's wild. Like, you see people flying through intersections, two-hand texting or whatever on their phone. I'm like, what is going on? Like, how?
I'm almost getting to the point where I think it should be, like, on the licensing test. It's like, can you operate the car while you're, also filing your taxes on your iPad or whatever?
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's so funny. We do talk a lot about how licensing should actually be a little bit harder on this show. And just, a little bit more stringent when it comes down to it, that we just don't have those requirements.
Yeah.
I know that that's kind of like a stretch from, actually using your phone while being, in a vehicle. But saying, like, maybe we should have a bit more stronger regulations on handing out licenses.
Yeah. We got to be proactive about it. People are going to do it anyway. Yeah. It's like, can you drive at 70 miles an hour while you're playing Candy Crush? If not, you're not getting a license in New York State.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I kind of think like we have distracted driving laws here. I'm not sure if they do in Europe, because when I was in Austria, we're on the highway, and we were passing truck drivers who were like this.
Yeah,
they're like staring at their phone while driving down the highway. I'm like, well, okay. It's not safe. I don't know about you guys, but sometimes if I'm driving and I'm going along, you could see there she's shoulder checking, she's looking places, right? She's got other things she's at least trying to pay attention to.
She's doing a really good job speaking, like, what's on her mind, or like what's on, like, written down for her head for this meeting, while also being an attentive driver at the same time.
Because if I'm trying to focus on driving, I do not have that much energy for a serious conversation like you would be having in a city council meeting. I
gotta tell you, after 8 hours of that council meeting, you guys played a clip from, my brain was being used maybe at 1% of its capacity. I could have been doing anything in that meeting. These things are so incredibly dry. But I see your point. But you could probably do open heart surgery after, if you're a council member after a certain point of attending these things.
Yeah. Which I know upsets a lot of people, because everybody who comes in there, they want to feel like they're being listened to and heard. But after an 8 hour long meeting, even if you
brain
agree
just
with
melts.
the people,
after the first 3 or 4 testimonies, you're like, whatever. I don't wake me up if you start like
what are you saying,
Nazi rhetoric or something. But
call me when it gets good. Like, come on, guys.
Yeah, exactly.
Come on, I don't want to hear your complaints about the tree branch length on Olive Avenue, okay? Like,
it takes
not my problem.
It takes a lot of energy.
Yeah.
But Yeah, that's brutal. Thanks for sharing that with us, Nick.
Yeah, thanks, Nick.
Let's get into some listener questions. Do you want to take this first one, Ethan?
Yeah, sure. So this one comes to us from Lynn M. And they comment, I have been wondering what your thoughts on people leaving cities for school districts in the suburbs. Bringing more cars on road, more people on roads driving to the city for weekend events. Thanks.
Interesting.
Is that a question?
Is it a question?
Yeah, what are your thoughts? What are your thoughts on people leaving the cities for school districts in the suburbs, Miser?
Oh, my thoughts on it? I mean,
yeah,
I don't
what are
have
your
kids.
thoughts?
I'm not really like, I don't know. This is outside of my wheelhouse. I think it shouldn't be allowed. I think if we should have 15-minute cities and you're not allowed to leave. No, I don't know.
Many people are saying this, Miser. Thank you for that very awesome
Someone's
take.
going to listen and be like, I knew it.
Yeah, right. Got him.
Where's our Soros money again?
Yeah, right.
Come on. The check's got to come in or else I'm going to go back to my normal.
Yeah.
I mean, all schools should just be good enough that like people are able to walk to schools. I think that's also an important aspect of growing up is being able to access your school on foot. I think it's a great independence exercise for kids, right?
I think a lot of this comes down to is that in the U.S. we fund our schools through basically local taxes.
Right.
So property taxes are how we fund our educational districts, which, if you think about it, is kind of insane. Because that means that, obviously, there's going to be massive inequity between different school districts.
Yeah.
And so districts where people, have larger properties are going to be able to fund their schools better than ones that don't. So it really all comes down to that at the end of the day in the U.S., is that we kind of, at least in the U.S., we need to fix how we fund our schools at the end of the day, just to, make sure that we have a more equitable distribution of our schools. But we're not the education, channel here. We're talking about urbanism. I mean, education is important, but, making sure we have those equitable systems so that way people don't have to go way out of their way to get a good education is something that is pretty important.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's such a foreign concept here in Canada because generally, like the public school system, the schools are mostly the same. Like certain schools will specialize in certain things like arts or trades and stuff like that. But generally, like I can only think of people who would change schools if they, like my sister did this. She went to a different school than we might normally have gone to because she was into the arts. So she went to a school that specialized in that. But like, you don't think of people moving just for going to a better school, right, in a better district. Like I always think of that one quote from I Love You Man where he's like, oh, I can't get you that close to downtown. They're like, why? He's like, the schools are terrible. And I always thought that odd, but now I understand.
Yeah, I think it is more of an American concern.
Yeah, well, I mean, you got to remember, too, that the people that could change that also have a perverse interest in not doing it because even the most like liberal, progressive-minded people who want to tackle institutional racism all of a sudden become quite conservative when it's little Tommy, when you start talking about busing or something, it's like, oh, little Tommy's education might be hurt, right? So the people in power with the money and that control the councils have no interest in changing it, which is why it hasn't changed in decades. And the schools are as segregated as they ever were. So,
yeah. But I think it says more about just the system in general. Because, like, if we had a system where you could get to these other districts without getting in a car, then it wouldn't really matter as much, right? If you could get on an e-bike and get there safely, if the kid could do that themselves or get on transit, right? So
I mean, districts are kind of based locally in the U.S., so like if you live in a certain district, you have to go to the schools in that district. There are ways to get out of that, but for the most part, if you live in that district, you have to go to that district.
It also wouldn't, like, just having better transit or having better transportation, e-bikes or whatever, wouldn't address the underlying problems that some schools are wildly underfunded because their local property values are...
Yeah. But I was just trying to talk to Lynn's point about bringing more cars on the road and more people driving cars into the city.
Yeah.
That's a bigger structural issue that where I think
it really is. It's a massive one though that we have to fix.
We're trying,
but we're not trying in the U.S. We're probably making it worse. We're trying to privatize schools here. Good Lord.
Yeah.
Well, Jen, I'll just read Jen's comment here. She says, as a small townie, there were only two options, Catholic school or a public school, both walkable unless you lived on a farm or acreage. Yeah, I think a lot of people live in a similar situation where it's like, well, these are my choices, and you gotta, everybody's going to try and pick what they feel is best for their kids.
Yeah.
And I know in Canada, a lot of the time, people try and get their kids into like a French immersion school. Those are often viewed as being better in some way. A lot of it depends on access, and that, we talk about food deserts and whether or not we have access to food. I think similar things apply to education. Like, people got to have access to good education and being able to actually fund that, and in a way that people have access to in their community is really important. But let's get on to this next question. Do you want to take that one, Nick?
This is from Skitch. Give a shout out to a person or an organization who is actively making your city a better place to be in. And I guess I'll just give a start, and it's to Hub Cycling. Hub Cycling, they do a lot of education stuff when it comes to bikes and such. They go to schools and do education programs for kids, which I think is incredibly important to getting the next generation onto wheels.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Miser, other than yourself, obviously.
Yeah.
Who do you think is making a big difference in New York City?
It's a good question. We have several nonprofits here that are in the space that are doing work. I think the only one that's actually making any sort of real difference is probably a group called Open Plans, which is a nonprofit. We have a bike advocacy group. I don't mean to. Oh, maybe I shouldn't. But yeah, I feel like we have a lot of wasted effort sometimes in the groups that are working on it, because this is maybe this is too inside baseball of an answer, but a lot of the groups working in this space in New York and probably in other cities are nonprofits, which are not allowed to engage in politics by law. Right, or they lose their tax exempt status, which they obviously do not want to do. So they cannot engage in politics in any way, really, which is a big problem if you're trying to actually tackle these issues, because a lot of them, as you said, Alex, are political problems that require, quite frankly, a bit of knife fighting. So
yeah, like actually, getting like serious about it.
Yeah.
Are they able to do report cards like during elections and be like, this is how this person falls on this, and this?
Yeah, I think they probably could do that. And you can do you can like invite politicians to your event if you invite all of them and stuff. But it's very kid gloves stuff,
Oh, okay.
And they're always very hesitant to run even a little bit afoul of that, because
right.
The ramifications are huge.
Yeah.
And they're doing it as their profession a lot of times. Like our group is just very grassroots, so it's not like you can let fly with anything, and there's you're not going to lose your job over it. So anyway.
Interesting. Yeah. It's a tough thing to balance and to figure out also, like, the different rules in your jurisdiction. I know in Alberta, you can become a third-party advertiser, which lets you endorse different candidates if you want, while also operating as a nonprofit and doing that advocacy work. And so some organizations in Calgary have decided to go that route. Others stick with we're just going to give everybody a report card. We're just going to say kind of like, these are the people who are supportive of transit and to what degree. Right. And these are the people who are supportive of micromobility and to what degree.
It definitely helps. Even something like that, though, helps if you collect the people that care about it into one group and point them all in the same direction,
Yeah.
Like, for instance, we say this a lot in the sub to sort of like keep our spirits high, is that, there's 23,000 people in our group, right? Which is fairly large. And the last mayoral election, the mayor's like a king. He's like a god king when it comes to the streets in New York City. The last mayoral election, the primary, which is the important thing because they're all Democrats in New York, his primary was won by 7,000 votes. Right? There's 23,000 in our community. Granted, they're not all going to vote or vote the same way or whatever, but that's a large amount of influence on races that frankly, a lot of people do not turn out to, right? So a small group of really dedicated people wherever you live can have an enormous effect relative to to the size of your municipality or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you think about, the impact that public hearings have and how many people turn out to those compared to how many people there are who are concerned about this issue, let alone how many people there are who literally could not care less.
Yeah.
Our last municipal election in Calgary was a 47% voter turnout, right? Like your voice matters. And I think my riding in the last provincial election, it was won by 7 votes, right?
Yeah.
Like your voice matters, and these organizations, they do have weight. I guess, did you share somebody who you want to give a shout out to, making a difference in
yeah, I mean,
Portland?
I'll give a shout out to Jonathan Mouse over at Bike Portland. They've been doing some great work for a while now, and really showing some news articles, especially towards cycling, but they do also do some transit coverage. They also have their own podcast, but they've been doing some great coverage around the Portland area, and just, shouting out other great, advocates in the region as well, too, and directing some great attention towards City Council about PBOT here, which is our Bureau of Transportation, on, riders' issues and things like that.
Nice. Well, that's great. Maybe if we can put links in the show notes for these places to direct people. I'll say one in Calgary. Housing has been obviously on the top of people's minds. You got to have a place to sleep. You got to have a roof over your head. I'll give a shout out to More Neighbors Calgary. You should hop in the Discord if you're in Calgary and want to support that sort of thing. But over there we support building more homes for people. Isn't that nice? Well, I'll read us the last question here, and it is from friend of the show, Jen Hall. She says, if you could gift all of your friends one urbanism related book, what book would you give them? Let's start with Nick. You look like you have an answer ready to go.
Both of my cats are on my desk right now.
Oh, never mind. You're looking
No,
at
I got it. It's right here, and I feel bad for just shilling for this book because there's so many books I love. But the thing I love about this book is it's a great coffee table book, and we had Roy Simons on the podcast. We did an interview, which is this book here, Feet's Pad. It's just, I love coffee table books. It's beautiful. It's stunning. It's got lovely pages where you can explore his journey around the Netherlands in all different fashions. Just in a lot of mundane stuff, but like, I don't know. It makes you feel like you're there when you go through this book. If you haven't been to the Netherlands, it's a great experience just to go through and just check out to see what kind of infrastructure they have there and what it looks like just to be in normal places in the Netherlands. It's really cool.
That is really cool. I like that. Ethan, what do you think? What's your rec?
I'm gonna go with a pretty simple one here. I have it over on my TV stand, but it's The Geography of Nowhere. They are once again trying to sign. I said this in chat earlier, but every loud car appears to be driving by me right now.
It's on brand.
But it's the car industry trying to silence us. But I would have to recommend The Geography of Nowhere. It's a really good starter and kind of gives you the contextualization of how we kind of, built ourselves into a corner of sprawl. And I think it's a really good way to kind of look at urban planning, more from the above angle and kind of see, a broader picture of North American urban planning and how we got ourselves into suburbia being everywhere.
Nice. That's super cool. Miser, do you have a recommendation?
Yeah, sure. I don't read books. No. I would say that Janet City Khan, our legendary DOT commissioner, wrote a pretty decent book. It's called Street Fight, about her time in Michael Bloomberg's DOT. And honestly, we'd be so screwed without her. She started City Bike, our giant bike share program. It's like, I think the highest ridership outside of anywhere other than China. She basically started all the bike lanes, got the DOT to start all the processes for everything. She's amazing figure in our broader movement. So yeah, definitely check out her book.
Sweet. And what's the title of that again?
It's called Street Fight.
Street
Fights or
Okay.
something like that. I don't know, something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's Street Fight.
Yeah.
That sounds rad, actually. And for my recommendation, I was going to recommend All Our Sisters, which I will recommend. All Our Sisters by Susan Scott. That's about homeless women in Canada. But I talked about that book last week. Here's another book that has been mentioned on the show. It's called Invisible Women. And it says data bias in a world designed for men. This was mentioned on the show by Patty, who is the Winnipeg bicycle mayor. She brought it up, and I wasn't on that episode of the podcast, but when I listened to it, I was reminded that I had this on my shelf and had yet to read it. And oh boy, like it's not all urbanism stuff, but there are a few key chapters that talk about transit and snow removal and things like that, and the way that those things impact women in particular more than they do men. But also, it just like gave me a lot of really great insights for like, oh my goodness, these are ways that we can just like improve the livability of our city for broad swaths of the population, especially when you consider things like the curb cut effect. And so Invisible Women by Caroline Criado Perez. Very good book. It's a little bit thicker, but it is very well written, and it flies by. Very entertaining and insightful. But yeah, this was a great show. This was a fantastic show. I'll just give a quick plug again for the Patreon here. You can go to patreon.com/radiofreeurbanism. That gets you into our live chat that we have while we're doing the show here. And also into our Discord server, where we have a ton of fun and get some listener questions and more conversations throughout the week about different news items that are going on. Nick, you have something to say.
Yeah, next week we're recording a day late because next Wednesday is Christmas Day. So we're going to be recording on Boxing Day, the 26th, at the regular time. And we're going to have on Brandon, a.k.a. American Feetser.
Fantastic. It's gonna be super exciting. Austin says Christmas already. I know. It has flown by. I cannot believe it is almost 2025. I never thought I'd make it this long. Growing up, 2020 was always the future. Like that was the future. And now that we're past 2020, every moment is quite cherished and quite delightful. And we have a lot of opportunity. Austin does say the world was supposed to end in 2012. So listen, I got 13 bonus years here. I have 75 more to go, and I cannot wait for it. Give us one last plug here, Miser. Tell us where the people can find you, follow you, and get involved with the work that you're doing.
Sure. As been mentioned a few times, the Micromobility NYC subreddit obviously on Reddit. I have a Blue Sky now that I guess I'm doing. I don't even know what my handle is. I guess you could search Miser NYC or something like that. I think that's it. Miser NYC. I don't know. Whatever.
Perfect.
You'll find me.
Yeah. I love it. Well, thank you for joining us on the show. With that, I'll pass it off to Ethan, who is our wrap-up king here. And he's talking. He thinks I'm talking over him, but I'm not because he's muted.
Oh, that's
there
right.
You go.
I am.
You're
oh
unmuted.
My goodness. Look at this guy. Unmuting me because big car is trying to silence me with everybody deciding to drive their big truck by. Nick, where can the good people find you and your cat?
You can find us on YouTube, Instagram, or Blue Sky at Nick the Door. And Alex, how about you?
The people can find me on Instagram and YouTube at Humane Cities, or you can also find me on any platform, especially if you want to follow my election journey. Follow me at Alex Williams YYC on pretty much any platform. Miser, I guess we already talked about where people can find you. We went through that, so I guess we'll do it again for a fourth time.
Did you mention your YouTube channel?
Oh yeah,
I do have a YouTube channel too. I think.
Yeah, because you've posted a few ones recently, but there was one where you interviewed a woman. What was it like? She said a quote, and that was the title. I can't remember. It was like, bikes are for all bodies, all sizes, all shapes.
Oh yeah, that's a friend of mine, Roz. She lives here in New York City.
Yeah, it's just like a 2-minute video, but I thought it was so great just to highlight those points, but also the fact that you're at the place where they've installed modal filtering, and you see multiple cars disobey.
Almost got run over while we were out there, which really made the point. Like, we were talking about that at hearing. I'm like, guys, did you like the video? And a few people were like, I found it a little distracting. I'm like, but what about the point that we couldn't get through a 5-minute video without a car killing us? You know, like, does that say something about New York? I think it does. But
yeah.
Anyway.
Okay, so check out your YouTube channel as well, which is Micromobility NYC. Is that it?
Probably. I don't know.
I think it's Miser.
Yeah.
Micromobility NYC. Yeah.
I'm clearly well prepared for this and taking.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay, Ethan, tell us where the people can find you. And you're still muted. You're still muted. 1 second. Okay, tell us where the people can find you.
How do I keep getting muted?
It's because your keyboard keeps going clickety clack, and I cannot take it anymore.
I am not touching my keyboard. My hands are right here.
No, I know you're not touching your keyboard, but you were.
Yeah, I was. But the good people can find me on Climate and Transit on pretty much every single social media that's out there, folks. Thank you so much for tuning into the show. It's wonderful to have all the people in the live chat and everybody who's going to be watching 24 hours from now. Thank you, Miser, for coming on as a guest.
Thank you for having me.
And as always, train good, car bad.
2 cats good.
And feet first.